Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. The U.S. sets preliminary anti-dumping duties of over 10% on imported steel products from Korea. Where is China's economy headed as Chinese President Xi Jinping aims for a modern economy? And what came out of the latest ECB monetary policy meeting? We take a look at what business stories made headlines around the globe this week. But first, Moodys Investor Service projects the Korean economy to grow 3% this year, citing the country's diversified and competitive economy with strong potential for high income levels. It added that Korea has a strong institutional framework that makes it resilient to potential financial risks. The agency, however, predicted a slightly lower growth for next year at 2.8%, pointing to geopolitical risks stemming from North Korea as a key credit constraint. Looking ahead, Moodys was optimistic that Asia's fourth largest economy will be able to maintain its growth around the 3% level over the next 5 years. Korea's consumer sentiment has rebounded, increasing for the first time in 3 months amid subsiding tensions over North Korea. The Bank of Korea says its consumer sentiment index jumped 1.5% over the previous month to 109.2 in October. The index had been on an upward trend for 6 consecutive months up until July, when it hit a 6.5-year high. But it fell in August and September following a string of North Korean provocations, as well as Beijing's economic retaliations over Seoul's deployment of THAAD. President Moon Jae-in hit the road on Thursday to highlight one of his key campaign pledges, decentralizing power away from the capital, Seoul. Now, speaking at a ceremony in the southern city of Yeosu, the president said he wanted to amend the constitution to grant greater control to regional governments. Our Moon Geon-young reports.
Distributing more power away from the central government to the local level was one of the new South Korean president's campaign pledges, and he doubled down on that vow Thursday at a ceremony marking the day dedicated to the nation's efforts to strengthen local autonomy.
새 정부는 수도권과 지방이 함께 잘 사는 강력한 지방 분권 공화국을 국정 목표로 삼았습니다. 흔들림 없이 추진해 가겠습니다.
In order to do so, the South Korean leader laid out 3 proposals.
첫째, 명실상부한 지방 분권을 위해 지방 분권 개헌을 추진하겠습니다.
To that end, the Moon administration will institutionalize a secondary cabinet to meet periodically with local government leaders and make constitutional amendments to give local governments the power to legislate new laws, come up with their own welfare programs and finance strategies. The amendment will also make official the term local government rather than local autonomous bodies.
둘째, 개헌과 별도로 실질적인 지방 분권을 확대하겠습니다. 지방 재정 자립을 위한 재정 분권도 강력하게 추진하겠습니다.
The South Korean president said the government is working to devise the tax distribution ratio between central and local governments from the current 8:2 to 7:3 and ultimately 6:4. In addition, the new administration will roll up its sleeves to give extra boost to innovative city projects in different regions to ensure balanced development across the entire country. South Korea's development plan has long focused on the capital city of Seoul and the surrounding area, resulting in huge disparity between urban and rural areas, creating a national divide between those living in the capital area and residents of other regions. Speaking to 17 mayors and governors of the nation ahead of the ceremony, the president urged support and cooperation in realizing his grand plan, which will essentially set up a virtual federal government system.
고도 성장기에는 중앙 집권적인 국가 운영 방식이 효과적인 측면이 있었다고 봅니다. 그러나 이제는 중앙 집권적 국정 운영 방식으로는 더 이상 성장 동력을 만들어낼 수가 없는 그런 시대가 되었습니다. 이제는 자치와 분권이 대한민국의 새로운 성장 동력이 될 것입니다.
Moon Geon-young, Business Daily.
The government says it has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to bribery for employment opportunities and benefits and will impose strict punishments on anyone found in violation. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
The Korean government has rolled up its sleeves to clamp down on public officials who have committed bribery in exchange for employment opportunities and benefits in state agencies or in the private sector. In a meeting with ministers of 12 public agencies on Friday, the Minister of Strategy and Finance, Kim Dong-yeon, said he'll build a special operations headquarters by the end of this year tasked with rooting out such corruption in state agencies and affiliated institutions during the past 5 years. Kim says he'll impose severe disciplinary action on those involved, release the identity of those found guilty, and prohibit them from acquiring a state job for 5 years.
For a thorough investigation, we'll keep personnel-related documents until the investigation is over. Those that are found to have destroyed or altered evidence would be considered implicated to such allegations.
He also said those found guilty will be sacked regardless of their position or status, and that auditors and inspectors who have turned a blind eye will be held responsible for the same offense. The minister says it will make it mandatory for internal investigative units to inspect bribery suspicions within 2 months of hiring personnel and set up a center to report such schemes. The minister's remarks come amid reports by local media outlets and the Board of Audit and Inspection of Korea stating more than 10 state agencies have been involved in receiving or offering bribes for employment benefits and opportunities. In Korea's only casino accessible to local residents, around 520 new recruits during 2012 to 2013 were found to have been hired due to special favors, while a major local bank was found to have hired some 20 people with parents considered VIP clients, including high-ranking state officials. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Semiconductors are one of Korea's main export items, and it seems that their proportion of the country's total export volume will hit a record high this year. According to industry sources, Korea exported $70 billion worth of memory chips in the first 9 months of the year, a 56% jump compared to a year earlier. With this increase, semiconductors accounted for 16% of Korea's total export volume during the 9-month period, their highest figure ever. Experts say with high global demand for DRAM and NAND flash chips expected to continue until the end of the year, the chip portion of Korea's export volume could enter the 20% range. The U.S. has announced new anti-dumping measures on Korean steel exporters, including POSCO. The U.S. Commerce Department said on Thursday that low-priced imports were hurting America's steel industry. Our Lee Jung-yeon has the latest.
The U.S. Department of Commerce has issued preliminary anti-dumping duty determinations on carbon and alloy steel wire rod from several countries, including South Korea. Last year, Korea's exports of those products to the U.S. were estimated to be worth $46 million. According to the Commerce Ministry, South Korean exporters dumped wire rod at, quote, less than fair value, and therefore POSCO and all other local exporters will have to pay the U.S. an anti-dumping margin of approximately 10%. That's lower than the 33 to 43% initially requested by U.S. steelmakers, and also significantly lower than duties on similar products from other countries, such as the United Kingdom, which has a maximum margin of almost 150%, and South Africa with 140%. The Commerce Department is scheduled to announce its final anti-dumping decisions at the beginning of next year. Speaking to the press on the same day, South Korea's new ambassador to the U.S., Cho Yoon-jae, said that trade between South Korea and the U.S., including the Chorus FTA, has been favorable. And though it won't be easy, he said, he hopes further negotiations on the FTA will be beneficial to both countries. Lee Jung-yeon, Business Daily.
LG Electronics has posted stronger than expected numbers in the third quarter, mainly due to the strong performance of its home appliances division. The company announced an operating income of $455.7 million in the July to September period, a 45% on-year jump. Overall revenue, meanwhile, was tallied at $13.4 billion, 13% higher compared to a year earlier. However, the company's mobile division posted an operating loss of $331 million. But LG says the business is trending upwards despite numbers in the red. Korean automaker Kia Motors also released its third quarter earnings today, and the figures were disappointing, reflecting low sales in China. The company reported an operating loss of $380 million in Q3, dipping into the red after an operating profit of $467 million a year ago. Sales in China tumbled 40.9% on year, and Kia's market share in the country has now fallen to just 1.6%. The firm's recent loss in a class action labor lawsuit over unpaid wages also played a big role. The automaker's third quarter earnings factored in a roughly $890 million wage bill as a result of the court ruling in favor of its labor union. And now moving on to our coverage of the markets, we have our markets contributor Lee Ji-hye joining us on the line. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Ji-yoon.
All right, so how did local stocks perform on the last trading day of the week?
Well, South Korean stocks extended gains mostly on today as investors scooped up blue chip stocks on bargaining hunting. The benchmark Kospi rose 0.64% to close at 2,496.63, and tech-heavy Kosdaq also rose 1.38% to close at 689.97 this afternoon. Tech and steel stocks led the gains, with market bellwether Samsung Electronics rising 1.3% and leading steelmaker POSCO climbing 2.87%. Naver also advanced 4.64%. LG Chem was also up 2.79%, and carmaker Kia Motors gained 0.44% as well, especially after the company announced a 12.7 jump in Q3 earnings as of yesterday. Kia reflected nearly 1 trillion won in one-off expenses in its third quarter results involving unpaid wages to its workers following the company's loss in a class action labor lawsuit. In contrast, top car maker Hyundai Motors fell 0.63%, and Hyundai Mobis also declined 0.2%.
Now, tell us how Asian stocks performed today as well.
Sure, Ji-yoon. As for Japan, the Nikkei 225 gained 1.24% as the dollar strengthened. Most tech stocks, automakers, and financials climbed during the session as well. According to government data from Tokyo, core consumer prices in September increased 0.7% compared to a year ago. Over in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index surged 0.65% as investors digested quarterly earnings reports from China Life Insurance as well as China Construction Bank. CCB shares traded in Hong Kong rose over 3% as of earlier today, while most property stocks notched gains. Mainland markets were also mixed. The Shanghai Composite was up 0.04%, and the Shenzhen Composite was down 0.18%.
Now, back on the local front, many are crediting the recent Kospi rally to the thawing of diplomatic tensions with China. Can you tell us more?
Sure, Ji-yoon. The local shares rose mostly today, and many are saying that this may hint at a continued clawing back from the losses from the previous session, going hand in hand with easing political and diplomatic tensions between Beijing and Seoul, with the consumer and tourism sectors seeing the biggest windfall. Hotel Latte was quoted as saying that Chinese tour company Ctrip is considering a resumption of tour packages sales to South Korea on its website, and this pushed Lotte Tour Development shares up by 30%, which is the daily bourse limit. South Korea's cosmetics-related companies as well, whose biggest export market is China, also gained. Amore Pacific, as of today, was up nearly 2%, and Hanguk Cosmetics also rose 5.3%. In addition to this, with the European Central Bank's dovish policy move yesterday, many analysts are predicting a rebound to come next week, with some predicting the Kospi Index to surpass the 2,500 threshold. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
With Chinese President Xi Jinping securing his second term, there are signs of thawing tensions between Seoul and Beijing over Korea's deployment of THAAD. This amid reports of Chinese travel agencies resuming the sale of group tour packages to Korea, perhaps signaling an end to Beijing's unofficial travel ban adopted earlier this year. Our Yoo Jun-hee has the story.
In its first press briefing following the end of China's 19th Communist Party Congress, China's foreign ministry expressed hopes of restoring friendly ties with South Korea. Ministry spokesperson Deng Xiao said Beijing wanted to work out its differences with Seoul, adding that bilateral relations have brought many tangible economic and trade benefits to both countries.
We are willing to work with South Korea to overcome the obstacles in the development of bilateral ties, resume friendly exchanges in all fields step by step, and push forward with the steady and sound China-South Korea relationship.
These comments and other recent developments have indicated that South Korea and China are looking to bury the hatchet over Seoul's deployment of a U.S. THAAD anti-missile battery. On Tuesday, the two countries' defense ministers held talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN Security Forum, the first such meeting in 2 years. The neighbors also renewed a $56 billion currency swap deal earlier this month, while discussions are also underway for a possible summit meeting between Presidents Moon Jae-in and Xi Jinping. Beijing's unofficial travel ban to South Korea may also be coming to an end, with reports emerging that Chinese travel agencies are resuming the sale of group tour packages to the country. The new advertisements promoting travel to South Korea are the first of their kind seen in 7 months, when Beijing began engaging in economic reprisals in protest of Seoul's THAAD deployment. South Korea's tourism industry had suffered a heavy blow over the fallout, with the number of Chinese tourists plunging by more than half between March and August of this year. Yoo Jun-hee, Business Daily.
And the THAAD retaliations from Beijing have also taken a toll on local firms doing business in China. So a business forum was held this week at Korea's only Chinatown in the port city of Incheon to support the affected firms. Our Won Jung-hwan takes us there.
The dispute over THAAD has taken its toll on the business environment for Korean firms with interest in China. Lotte Group has had to begin withdrawing from the country, and according to figures released by the Korean Central Bank, investment in China by Korean firms fell over 40% in the first 7 months of this year. To try and revitalize the deteriorating business relationship between the two countries, the city of Incheon has gathered academics and business experts from Korea and China. The 2017 In China Forum aims to creating more business opportunities going beyond the simple import-export model to try and establish deeper exchange. Forum organizers have invited more than 250 people from China and another 250 from Korea to share their views on a variety of business topics, from startups to big data, under the motto of Hao Pengyou, or good friend.
So we invited them here without thinking about some political reasons. Friend is friend. So that by doing so, we wish to renew the friendship as well as deepening the human network and widening the human network through this kind of event.
The forum, which goes on until Friday, was also designed to create a model of interchange and business development with China by jointly exploring effective business models, hoping to boost economic exchange amid the current difficult business environment.
We urge a positive relationship where security is priority in any nation. So how to maintain the security of two countries at the same time have a positive economic development for the good faith of two countries and two nations people. I'm looking forward for a long-term relationship.
Despite the current THAAD dispute, the organizers of this event hope it can start repair the relationship between the two countries and lead to a brighter future. Won Jung-hwan, Business Daily, Incheon.
And time now for a look through some important global business headlines from the week with our Eunice Kim joining us in the studio. Hello, Eunice.
Happy Friday.
All right. So already there are small signs of hope that relationship between Korea and China could see some sunnier days ahead. Now, but in the long run, could we see a shift in trade dynamics of the world's second largest economy?
That certainly is a question, isn't it, June? So this time around, we didn't necessarily see a blueprint with specific economic goals for the next 5 years, but we did see a takeaway focus that was much more long-term, that featured a shifting priority of balanced modernization. Now, this, of course, will be spearheaded by President Xi Jinping, who has positioned himself as the country's unrivaled leader, perhaps well beyond his second 5-year term. Take a look.
The absence of an economic growth target at this year's 19th Communist Party Congress gives China's leadership room to install needed reforms to bring the state of 1.4 billion people into President Xi Jinping's, quote, new era for the Middle Kingdom. Beating what was to be the grand finale of the week-long event, the unveiling of China's top leadership, was the inclusion of the Xi Jinping Thought for the New Era of Socialism with Chinese characteristics into China's constitution. With the move, the 64-year-old leader elevated to the ranks of Deng Xiao Ping, who brought economic reforms and, some say, possibly even side by side with Mao Zedong himself, the founder of modern China. While Xi may not have a little red book of revolutionary quotes, his doctrine will now be studied by students of all ages and infused into the core of society through the government and its media mouthpieces. An emphasis on modernization through shared and balanced growth could mean a slowdown in Korea's exports of intermediary goods to China as it steps away from a growth at all costs mentality.
From a manufacturer's point of view, it's concerning because it's very likely that China will implement a much stronger environmental protection policy than the past.
There had already been movements to shut down thousands of factories across China, citing environmental violations. And now, with environmentally responsible growth written into the Xi Jinping Thought document, this becomes an official state doctrine, together with advancing supply-side structural reforms, pursuing the Belt and Road Initiative, and of course the historical focus of economic growth. The end goal of developing an open economy of higher standards has a mid-target of 2035, and the realization of what Xi has called the China Dream is marked to be achieved by mid-century. Business people in Korea will be searching for new growth opportunities in the $11 trillion economy.
China's domestic market is in the active process of merging services and the internet in a very innovative way. This is an area we should target in making products or investment.
But it remains to be seen how open the Chinese leadership and ultimately Xi will be to letting outsiders in, particularly as the state's Great Firewall has become stronger and more formidable in recent months.
Well, on the outside, it certainly looks like that China is moving in a very different direction in terms of trade compared to President Trump, right?
So for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's now turn to Europe. Wall Street overnight reacted well to excellent tech earnings on Wall Street, as well as news out of the European Central Bank. Now, tell us more about what came out at the end of the European Central Bank's monetary policy meeting last night.
Sure. Two major points here. The European Central Bank last night clearly signaled a slowdown to its bond buying program that would begin next year. ECB President Mario Draghi said its pace of purchases would be cut by half to 30 billion euros per month from January through at least September of next year. Now, the central bank also said its QE program will be left open-ended after that for now, which sent the euro plummeting as investors were looking for a more hawkish stance. Now, the common currency was trading at $1.16 as of this morning, compared to $1.17 handle earlier in the week.
All right, and an interesting report came out this week, which ranked the world's most powerful passports, and we're hearing that Korea came up pretty high on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Korea came in third, tied with Sweden, both of which had 100 57 countries, which its citizens could access without pre-registering for a visa. The Passport Index is an online tool that's developed by Art and Capital, which is a residence and citizenship advisory firm. And according to its calculations, the country with the best cross-border access was, wait for it, can you guess? Singapore, breaking its tie with Germany after Paraguay lifted some travel, or actually implemented some travel reforms, giving its visa-free access to 159 countries for Singapore. Now, on the other hand, the U.S. dropped to number 6, tied with the likes of Malaysia, Ireland, and Canada. Turkey and the Central African Republic were some of the most recent states to revoke visa-free travel for Americans, this since President Donald Trump took office.
All right, interesting rankings indeed. Thank you so much for coming in today.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. But we'll be back next week with more of the day's top business stories. So don't forget to check back with us then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.